Invisible thread. Olivia Mercer folded the invitation card for the third time, smoothing the crease with her thumbnail. Her cousin Penelope's wedding was exactly the sort of event she typically avoided, an ostentatious celebration at the Grand Riverside Hotel with a guest list that read like a who's who of Connecticut's upper society. "You should go," her Aunt Beatrice said over their weekly phone call. "Family is family." Olivia glanced at the wilting potted plants on her apartment windowsill. At 28, she had built a quiet life teaching literature at the local community college, worlds away from her extended family's glamorous existence. Her mother had been the black sheep who married for love rather than status, and after losing both parents in a car accident at 16, Olivia had been raised by her grandmother, in a modest home filled with books and handmade quilts. "I don't have anything to wear," Olivia said, knowing how trivial it sounded. "Nonsense. That blue dress you wore to Professor Higgins' retirement would be lovely." The dress in question was simple, a knee-length cotton blend with cap sleeves that Olivia had purchased on clearance 3 years ago. It wasn't couture, it wasn't designer. It wasn't Penelope. Yet somehow, 2 weeks later, Olivia found herself standing at the periphery of the hotel's grand ballroom, clutching a flute of champagne she hadn't sipped. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Women, in silk and chiffon, floated by like exotic birds, their necks and wrists adorned with jewels that caught the light. Men in tailored tuxedos congregated in clusters of easy laughter and confident postures. "Olivia? Is that you?" A voice cut through her thoughts. Penelope's sister Victoria approached, her emerald dress whispering against the floor. "My God, you actually came." "Congratulations on the wedding," Olivia said, forcing a smile. "Everything looks beautiful." Victoria's gaze swept over Olivia's attire, lingering on her sensible low heels. "That's quaint. Did you make that yourself?" "No, Victoria, darling." A woman with a platinum bob waved from across the room. "Come meet the ambassador's son." "Duty calls," Victoria said with a practiced smile. "Help yourself to the canapes, the smoked salmon is divine." She leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. "Though perhaps you should wait until after the photos. Penelope wants everything to be perfect." The implication stung, but Olivia nodded. As Victoria glided away, Olivia overheard her whisper to another guest, "My cousin from my mother's side, the teacher. Can you believe she wore that off-the-rack number to Penny's wedding?" Laughter rippled through the small group, and Olivia felt her cheeks burn. She retreated further into the corner, wishing she could disappear into the ornate wallpaper. Her grandmother had always told her that true worth came from character rather than clothing, but in this moment, surrounded by wealth and judgment, those words felt like cold comfort. She set her untouched champagne on a passing server's tray and decided to find the restroom, a brief sanctuary where she could compose herself and perhaps even call a rideshare to escape this mistake. As she navigated through the crowd, snippets of conversation reached her ears. "Who invited the librarian?" "I think she's related to the bride somehow. That dress looks like it came from a thrift shop." Each comment was a tiny arrow, precisely aimed. Olivia quickened her pace, eyes fixed on the exit sign, when she collided with someone's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, looking up to find herself face to face with a tall man with kind eyes and an impressive jawline. "Entirely my fault," he replied, his voice warm and deep. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Before Olivia could respond, the wedding planner announced that all guests should take their seats for dinner. The man gave her a small smile before being pulled away by another guest, leaving Olivia alone once more, an invisible thread in a tapestry that didn't seem to need her presence at all. The unexpected defender. Olivia found her assigned table tucked in the far corner of the ballroom, as if her presence were an afterthought. The seating card read, "Table 19, in elegant calligraphy that somehow felt mocking. She slipped into her chair, grateful that most guests were still mingling, leaving her momentarily alone at the table adorned with orchids and crystal. "Is this seat taken?" The deep voice startled her. It was the man she'd bumped into earlier. Up close, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. the subtle pattern of his midnight blue tuxedo, and the absence of pretension in his posture. "I don't think so," Olivia replied, glancing at the place card beside her. "Unless you're Ethan Hargrove?" "Close." He smiled, turning the card to face her. "Julian Hargrove. Ethan's my younger brother." "Oh." Olivia fidgeted with her napkin. "I'm sorry, I didn't—" "No need to apologize." Julian settled into the chair beside her. "And you are?" "Olivia Mercer. I'm Penelope's cousin. Second cousin, technically." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Ah, from her mother's side? The one who teaches literature?" Olivia tensed, preparing for another subtle dig about her career or appearance. "Yes, at Westbrook Community College." "Fascinating," Julian said, leaning forward. "I just finished reading The Weight of Ink for my book club. What do you think of historical fiction that centers on overlooked academic figures?" The question was so unexpected and genuine that Olivia momentarily forgot her discomfort. She launched into an analysis of narratives that reclaim forgotten voices in history, and Julian listened with authentic interest, asking thoughtful follow-up questions. Their conversation flowed easily until the rest of the table began to fill. Two couples in their 50s arrived, followed by Victoria and her husband, whose expressions soured upon seeing Olivia. "Julian, darling," Victoria cooed, ignoring Olivia completely. "We expected you at the head table with Penelope and Richard. You're practically family." "The bride and groom are surrounded by enough admirers," Julian replied easily. "Besides, I'm having a fascinating discussion about 17th century women scholars." Victoria's smile tightened. "How academic?" She turned to her husband. "Darling, fetch me a proper drink. This champagne is giving me a headache." As dinner was served, conversation at the table split into two distinct currents. Victoria holding court with the older couples discussing vacation properties and boarding schools, while Julian continued his conversation with Olivia, undeterred by the obvious social division. When the main course arrived, a delicate sea bass with saffron risotto, Victoria's husband Thomas glanced at Olivia's animated explanation of Gothic literature elements and snickered. "I see Julian's been saddled with the community college. Professor?" he stage whispered to Victoria. "Always the gentleman taking one for the team." The table fell silent. Olivia's words died in her throat, her fork suspended above her plate. Julian set down his glass with deliberate care. "Actually, Thomas, I requested this seating arrangement." His voice was pleasant but edged with steel. "When Richard mentioned his cousin's literature background, I was intrigued. Unlike some, I find intellectual conversation more stimulating than discussions about property taxes and golf handicaps." Thomas's face flushed red. Victoria looked as though she'd swallowed something sour. "Now," Julian continued, turning back to Olivia, "you were explaining the symbolism of windows in Jane Eyre." The tension at the table was palpable, but Julian remained unfazed, his attention fully on Olivia, as if the others weren't there. She resumed her explanation, her voice stronger now, bolstered by his unexpected defense. When the orchestra began, playing for the first dance, Olivia watched as Penelope and Richard swayed across the floor looking like figures from a fairy tale. "They look happy," she murmured. "They are," Julian agreed. "Richard's been my best friend since boarding school. He was always the sensible one, keeping me out of trouble." He turned to face her fully. "Would you care to dance, Olivia?" She hesitated, acutely aware of her simple dress and uncoordinated nature. "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," Julian confessed with a conspiratorial smile. "But I find it's an excellent excuse to continue our conversation without Victoria's commentary." Olivia laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even herself. "In that case, how can I refuse?" As Julian led her onto the dance floor, whispers followed them like shadows. Olivia caught glimpses of raised eyebrows and smirks. Penelope's mother looked positively scandalized, whispering furiously to her husband. "Everyone's staring," Olivia whispered, her hand stiff in Julian's. "Let them," he replied, guiding her into a gentle waltz. Most people here are too concerned with appearances to recognize substance when they see it. And you think I have substance? Olivia asked, only half joking. Julian's eyes, warm and sincere, met hers. Olivia, in the 15 minutes we've talked, you've shown more genuine passion and intelligence than I've encountered at a dozen society events. So yes, I'd say you have substance in abundance. As they moved across the floor, Olivia gradually relaxed into the dance, the judgment of others fading into background noise. For the first time that evening, she felt visible, not as an object of derision, but as someone worth seeing. When the song ended, Julian kept hold of her hand. Another? He asked. Olivia glanced at Victoria's glowering face and the curious stares surrounding them. Then she looked back at Julian's expectant smile and made her choice. I'd love to, she said, and stepped into the next dance with newfound confidence. Midnight revelations, the wedding reception transformed as night deepened. Champagne flowed, inhibitions eased, and the carefully constructed social hierarchies began to blur at the edges. Near midnight, the dance floor had become a chaotic tableau of celebration. Bridesmaids with discarded heels, groomsmen with loosened ties, and elderly relatives performing surprisingly spry moves to contemporary music. Through it all, Olivia and Julian remained in each other's orbit. After several dances, they had retreated to a quiet balcony overlooking the hotel's illuminated gardens. The summer air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and fairy lights twinkled among the manicured hedges below. So you abandoned a career in corporate law to open a bookstore? Olivia asked, leaning against the stone balustrade. That must have shocked your family. Julian laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. Shocked is an understatement. My father didn't speak to me for 3 months. The Hargroves have been attorneys for 4 generations. Breaking tradition was tantamount to treason. Yet you did it anyway. I did. He swirled the remains of his whiskey. I spent 5 years in a corner office drafting contracts I didn't care about, making money I didn't need, feeling my soul slowly calcify. He looked at her. Have you ever had that feeling? That you're becoming a stranger to yourself? Olivia considered this. Not exactly. I've always known who I am. It's just that who I am never seemed to be enough. She gestured toward the ballroom, behind them. Especially in circles like this. Julian's expression softened. Tell me about your grandmother. You mentioned she raised you. The question surprised her. Most people glazed over when she mentioned her upbringing. After my parents died, she was all I had. She lived in this little craftsman house filled with books and plants and homemade preserves. She taught English at the same high school for 40 years. She sounds remarkable. She was. Olivia smiled at the memory. She used to say that education was the one thing no one could take from you. When the other kids got expensive clothes and the latest gadgets, she bought me classics bound in leather and took me to university lectures. She paused. She passed away during my final year of college. Julian placed his hand gently over hers. I'm sorry. Thank you. It's been 6 years, but I still catch myself wanting to call her when I read something interesting. Olivia looked up at the star-strewn sky. She would have hated this wedding, you know. All this extravagance. But she would have worn her best dress and brought a thoughtful gift anyway. She taught you well then. The muffled sounds of the reception continued behind them, but they remained in their private sanctuary, exchanging stories that gradually revealed the architecture of their lives. Julian told her about his bookshop, Hargrove and Daughters, named in playful defiance of his family's law firm. Olivia shared her dreams of someday publishing literary criticism that made classic works accessible to her community college students. Can I tell you something absurd? Julian asked after a comfortable silence had settled between them. Of course. When Richard first pointed you out at the rehearsal dinner yesterday, I was hoping you'd be at the wedding. Olivia blinked in surprise. You noticed me yesterday? Hard not to. You were the only person asking the catering staff about their lives rather than treating them like furniture. His smile was both shy and certain. I nearly approached you then, but you were deep in conversation with an elderly gentleman about gardening, Mr. Whitman, Penelope's great-uncle. Olivia laughed softly. He was telling me about his heirloom tomatoes. See? That's exactly what I mean. Everyone else was discussing stock portfolios and vacation homes, and you were learning about tomatoes. The orchestra inside began playing a slow, romantic melody. Julian stood and offered his hand. One more dance? Olivia hesitated. It's getting late, I should probably… Please, he said simply. The night's almost over. She took his hand, and they returned to the now sparse dance floor. Victoria was nowhere to be seen, and Penelope was draped affectionately over her new husband, both looking pleasantly tipsy. A few couples swayed to the music, most too engrossed in each other to notice Olivia and Julian. As they danced, Julian held her closer than before, their conversation continuing in hushed tones. What are you doing tomorrow? He asked. Grading. Papers. End of summer session. Cancel it, he suggested, eyes twinkling. Come to my bookshop instead. Sunday mornings are quiet. We could continue our debate about Austen versus the Brontes over coffee. Olivia looked up at him, searching for signs of pity or mockery, but found only genuine interest. Why me, Julian? You could be dancing with any woman here. That's precisely why I'm dancing with you, he replied without hesitation. Because you're not any woman here. You're the woman who doesn't belong here, just like me. The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Olivia realized that beneath his polished exterior and social ease, Julian too was an outsider, by choice rather than circumstance, but an outsider nonetheless. As the song reached its final notes, he leaned down and whispered, "Say yes to tomorrow, Olivia." The clock struck midnight, and in that moment, surrounded by luxury she hadn't earned and people who hadn't accepted her, Olivia made a decision that belonged entirely to herself. "Yes," she whispered back. "Tomorrow." Echoes of doubt. Olivia's apartment greeted her with familiar silence as she kicked off her sensible heels at 1:37 a.m. The events of the evening played through her mind like scenes from someone else's life. The dances, the conversation, Julian's invitation. It felt surreal, a beautiful dream from which she'd soon awaken. She moved through her nighttime routine mechanically, removing her minimal makeup and changing into worn pajamas. As she hung up her blue dress, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The same Olivia Mercer stared back at her. Mousy brown hair, unremarkable features, eyes too large for her face. Nothing special. Nothing that would attract someone like Julian Hargrove. "What are you doing?" she whispered to her reflection. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams in which she arrived at an elegant bookshop only to find everyone laughing at her presumption. She woke feeling hollow, doubt having carved out the previous night's confidence during the vulnerable hours of early morning. By 10 a.m., Olivia had convinced herself that Julian's interest had been circumstantial. A kind man, taking pity on an awkward woman, perhaps even a rebellion against the superficial values of his social circle. She composed a text declining his invitation, citing work responsibilities, then deleted it. Wrote another, deleted that too. Finally, she placed her phone face down on the kitchen counter and made coffee. Her apartment, normally a haven of comfort, felt suddenly inadequate. The second-hand furniture, the overflowing bookshelves, the mismatched mugs, all spoke of a life constructed on modest means and practical choices. What would Julian think if he saw where she lived? How she lived? 10:42, her phone chimed. A text from an unknown number. "Good morning, Olivia. It's Julian from last night. Richard gave me your number, hope that's okay. I'm at the shop now, setting out fresh pastries from the bakery next door. The coffee's brewing. No pressure, but there's a copy of that first edition Wolf essay collection. I mentioned waiting for you. The address is 237 Maple Street." Attached was a photo of a cozy reading nook with sunlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a worn leather armchair. Olivia's heart raced. She paced her small living room, arguing with herself. Going meant opening herself to potential humiliation. Staying meant never knowing what might have been. At 11:15, she texted back, "Running a bit late. Be there by noon." She changed clothes 4 times, settling on dark jeans and a soft green sweater that her grandmother had always said brought out her eyes. She attempted to style her hair, gave up, and pulled it into a simple ponytail. No makeup. He'd seen her natural face last night anyway. Hargrove and Daughters occupied a restored Victorian house on a tree-lined street in the historic district. Its deep blue exterior and gold lettering exuded quiet sophistication without pretension. Through the windows, Olivia could see wooden shelves laden with books and comfortable seating scattered throughout. She hesitated on the sidewalk, her instinct for self-preservation warring with something unfamiliar. Hope, perhaps, or courage. The bell above the door announced her entrance. The interior smelled of old books, fresh coffee, and cinnamon. A few customers browsed quietly, but there was no sign of Julian. Olivia's stomach knotted. Had this been an elaborate joke after all? "You came." Julian emerged from a back room, carrying a stack of leather-bound volumes. His smile was genuine, lighting his entire face. He wore jeans and a simple Henley shirt, looking more at ease than he had in his tuxedo. "I did," Olivia replied, suddenly conscious of her racing pulse. "I'm glad." He set down the books and approached her. "Let me give you the tour." The bookshop was everything a book lover could dream of. Sections organized not by typical categories but by themes like books that changed history and stories to read during thunderstorms. A spiral staircase led to a loft filled with academic texts and rare editions. In the children's corner, a hand-painted mural depicted characters from classic tales embarking on adventures together. "This place is magical," Olivia breathed, running her fingers along the spines of books in the poetry section. "It's home," Julian said simply. "More than any place I've lived." They settled in the reading nook from the photo, where Julian had indeed prepared coffee and pastries. Conversation came as easily as it had the night before, flowing from literature to philosophy to personal anecdotes. Olivia gradually relaxed, her earlier doubts receding as Julian listened to her thoughts on contemporary female poets with the same intensity he'd shown at the wedding. Around 2 p.m., the bell chimed again. Olivia glanced up and froze. Victoria and Penelope entered, both in designer sunglasses and casual luxury wear. "Julian," Penelope called out. "We thought we'd find you here. We're heading to brunch at Everett's before my flight." She stopped, abruptly upon noticing Olivia. "Oh, hello." Victoria removed her sunglasses, her gaze traveling from Julian to Olivia and back. "Well, isn't this cozy? We had no idea you'd have company." The way she said company made it clear that Olivia's presence was unexpected and unwelcome. Julian stood. "Penelope, Victoria. What a surprise. Shouldn't you be packing for your honeymoon?" "All taken care of," Penelope replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Richard's handling the last details." She turned to Olivia with artificial warmth. "How lovely to see you again, cousin. I didn't realize you and Julian had made plans." Before Olivia could respond, Victoria interjected. "Julian, darling, could we speak privately for a moment about that charity gala next month?" Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Anything you need to say can be said in front of Olivia. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand clutched her designer purse. "Fine. I just wanted to remind you that Eleanor Blackwood will be attending. She's been asking about you since her divorce, and her father's firm would be an excellent connection for your project." She glanced dismissively around the bookshop. "My business is doing quite well without corporate connections, thank you," Julian replied evenly. Penelope, sensing tension, stepped forward. "We should go. Our reservation's in 20 minutes." She kissed Julian's cheek. "Call me tomorrow. We need to catch up properly." After they left, the atmosphere in the bookshop felt charged with unspoken words. Olivia stared into her coffee cup, the familiar feeling of inadequacy washing over her. "I'm sorry about that," Julian said finally. "It's fine." Olivia managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They're your friends. And Victoria's right. Connections are important. Victoria hasn't been right about anything since we were children, Julian replied with unexpected sharpness. Then, more gently, Olivia, look at me. She raised her eyes to meet his. I don't care about Eleanor Blackwood or her father's firm. I don't care about charity galas or social connections. He leaned forward. I care about this conversation, about your thoughts on Sylvia Plath's later works, about the way you see the world. Olivia wanted desperately to believe him, but Victoria's visit had reawakened every insecurity, every doubt that had plagued her since receiving Penelope's invitation. I should go, she said, gathering her bag. I do have those papers to grade. Julian didn't try to stop her, but his disappointment was palpable. Will I see you again? At the door, Olivia turned back. The sunlight caught his profile, illuminating the genuine concern in his expression. This man who had defended her, listened to her, chosen her company over others, was he real? Or was he too good to be true? I don't know, she answered honestly, and stepped out into the afternoon, the bell's cheerful ring mocking the heaviness in her chest. The language of flowers. 3 days passed. Olivia threw herself into work, finalizing grades and preparing for the fall semester. She avoided checking her phone, though it occasionally buzzed with texts from Julian, each one thoughtful, none demanding a response. Found a first edition of that Carson McCullers we discussed. Thought of you. The cafe next door started carrying those lavender scones you mentioned liking. No pressure. Just wanted to say I enjoyed our conversations. On Wednesday evening, Olivia sat at her kitchen table correcting student essays when a knock at her door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone, and few people knew where she lived. Through the peephole, she saw Julian standing in the hallway, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. Panic fluttered in her chest. Her apartment was modest at best, revealing the economic reality of a community college professor's salary. Yet curiosity overrode her hesitation. She opened the door. How did you find me? Penelope, Julian admitted. I may have bribed her with first-class upgrades for their honeymoon. He shifted nervously from one foot to the other. May I come in, just for a minute? Olivia stepped aside, acutely aware of the stack of unwashed dishes in her sink, the threadbare sofa, the water stain on the ceiling corner. Julian entered but didn't seem to notice these imperfections. Instead, his gaze traveled over her bookshelves with evident appreciation. You have Lucia Berlin's collected stories, he noted, approaching one shelf. And signed? My grandmother's, Olivia explained. She stood in line for hours at a reading. In 1999, Julian nodded, continuing his survey. Your apartment has soul, Olivia. It feels lived in, cherished. It's small, she countered. It's authentic. He turned to face her. Like you, the compliment hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Julian extended the package. This is for you. Olivia accepted it hesitantly. The brown paper fell away to reveal a leather journal with her initials embossed in gold leaf. Inside, the first page contained a handwritten note. For your thoughts, all of them, even the ones you think no one wants to hear. Julian. Thank you, she murmured, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It's beautiful. There's something else. Julian took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what happened on Sunday, about Victoria and Penelope showing up, about all the things left unsaid. Olivia tensed. Julian, you don't have to explain. I do, he insisted gently, because I think you left believing that I might see you as some sort of novelty, a temporary distraction from my usual social circle. The accuracy of his assessment made Olivia flush. The thought had occurred to me. Julian moved to her small living room window where a collection of potted plants thrived on the sill. These are lovely. What are they? The change of subject confused her. Herbs mostly. Basil, thyme, rosemary, and some African violets that were my grandmother's. You nurture things, Julian observed. Plants, students, ideas. He turned back to her. Do you know why I left corporate law, Olivia? The real reason? She shook her head. I was engaged once to a woman named Charlotte. She checked all the boxes: family connections, appropriate education, designer wardrobe. We made sense on paper. His eyes grew distant. One night, at a function much like Penelope's wedding, I overheard her laughing with friends about my quaint interest in literature, how she planned to fix that after we were married. Olivia felt a pang of recognition at the word quaint, the same dismissive term Victoria had used to describe her dress. I realized then that I'd spent my entire life trying to fulfill others' expectations, Julian continued. My father's legal legacy, my mother's social ambitions, Charlotte's ideal of a suitable husband. None of it had anything to do with who I actually was. He met Olivia's gaze directly. When I saw you at the wedding, standing alone in that honest, blue dress, not pretending to be anyone but yourself, it was like seeing a version of the person I've been trying to become. The sincerity in his voice made something shift inside Olivia, a wall beginning to crumble. I left early on Sunday because I was afraid, she admitted. Not of you, but of hoping for something that seemed impossible. People like Victoria and Penelope have been reminding me of my place since childhood. Standing next to you makes that voice in my head louder, the one that says I don't belong. Julian crossed the room and took her hands in his. What if that voice is wrong? What if you belong exactly where you choose to be? It's not that simple. It could be, he suggested. Not easy but simple. Olivia looked down at their joined hands, his manicured and smooth, hers slightly ink-stained from grading. Different, yet somehow fitting together. I have something else for you, Julian said, releasing her hands to reach into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Inside was an invitation. Elegant cardstock with embossed lettering. Hargrove and Daughters Bookshop cordially invites you to the inaugural meeting of the Obscure Authors Society, a monthly gathering of minds who appreciate literature beyond the bestseller lists. Featured author, Beryl Markham. I'm starting a book club, Julian explained, for people who love literature for its own sake, not as a social credential. You were my inspiration. Olivia stared at the invitation, then back at Julian. You created a book club because of me? For you, he corrected, and for people like us who value substance over appearance, authenticity over pretense. He smiled. I've already recruited that elderly gentleman from the wedding, Mr. Whitman. Turns out he's a retired English professor with a passion for early 20th century female aviator authors. Laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep inside Olivia. Genuine, unrestrained joy that she hadn't felt in years. You're serious about this? About the book club? Julian's eyes crinkled. Very. About you? His expression softened. Even more so. He stepped closer, one hand gently cupping her cheek. Olivia Mercer. I don't care what Victoria thinks, or what Eleanor Blackwood's father's firm could do for my business. I care about finding someone who sees the world with both critical intelligence and compassion. Someone who nurtures plants and ideas with equal dedication. Someone who chose to wear her grandmother's bracelet to a society wedding, instead of buying something new. Olivia hadn't realized he'd noticed the simple silver bangle that had been her grandmother's, a detail lost among the diamonds and pearls adorning other guests. I'd like to know you better, Julian continued. Not despite who you are or where you come from, but because of it, if you'll let me. The last of Olivia's doubts didn't disappear. They rarely do in a single moment, but they retreated enough for hope to take root in their place. She thought of her grandmother, who had taught her that true connections were built on shared values rather than shared bank accounts. The book club meets next Thursday, she said, a smile playing at her lips. I happen to have Beryl Markham's West with the Night on my shelf. Is that a yes? Julian asked, his eyes bright with anticipation. Instead of answering, Olivia rose, on her tiptoes, and pressed her lips gently to his, a gesture that spoke more eloquently than words. When they parted, Julian's smile was radiant. I should warn you, he said, voice teasing, that Mr. Whitman is bringing his famous heirloom tomatoes to share. Perfect, Olivia replied, no longer afraid of being seen, truly seen, for exactly who she was. I know just the basil to pair with them. Outside her window, the evening light cast long shadows across the city. Inside, in her modest apartment with mismatched furniture and overflowing bookshelves, Olivia had found something unexpected. Not a fairy tale ending with prince and castle, but something far more valuable. A beginning written in their own words, on their own terms. As Julian helped her prepare a simple dinner in her tiny kitchen, their conversation flowing effortlessly from books to dreams to ordinary moments, Olivia realized that belonging wasn't about fitting into someone else's world. It was about creating a world where you already fit, exactly as you are. And in the language of flowers that her grandmother had taught her long ago, the meaning couldn't be clearer. Basil for good wishes, rosemary for remembrance, and time, most importantly time, for courage.